Song Revolution with John Chisholm on the NRT Podcast Network.
Hey guys, welcome to Song Revolution this week. I want to introduce you to a new friend of mine, but a really great friend, Sam Hart. Sam doesn't live too far from me, just a few miles down the road here south of Nashville. We've gotten to know each other over the last year or so when we were introduced by a mutual friend. Sam and his wife and family moved here from California, where Sam had served in the local church for a long, long time. And he's now a very successful producer and songwriter here, working with well-known artists as well as a lot of up-and-coming artists. And one of the things that I love about Sam is that we share the same heart to teach and to mentor and to coach. He has some amazing resources talking about what it means to develop music out of your own congregation. So I love Sam. Go to samhartmusic.com and check him out. But we had a great conversation. We got pretty honest in this conversation and really talked about the challenges of faith and belief when you've been a professional Christian in the church or in music or serving in ministry in some way. We go pretty deep into talking about even at times feeling that our faith was being deconstructed and how God has brought us into a deeper place of organic faith that isn't really dependent on churches or certain denominations or just even the things that we even have held to for a long time, but going deeper and deeper into the bedrock of our faith in Christ. He's a brilliant guy. I only invite brilliant people on the show. You guys know that. But Sam is a dear person. He's very transparent, very authentic. Those are very high values for him as well as for myself. So I think you're going to enjoy listening to this episode and getting to know my great friend right here in Nashville, Tennessee, Sam Hart. Sam Hart, welcome to the Song Revolution, bro.
John, thanks so much for inviting me, man.
Yeah.
It's an honor, and it's always fun hanging with you.
I know, right? We're going to do that. You brought me some coffee. Thank you.
Cheers.
From one of our nearby, cheers, bro. From one of our nearby shops, the 19 Coffee. I'm going to try to get them to sponsor us or something. But
you should.
I know, right? I'm there a lot.
Make an official drink,
I know, right?
the Chisholm Latte.
But they're cool. They grew out of, or they started out of Hope You See, which is a church that's affiliated with Darlene Check and her
crew,
worldwide, global, kingdom of churches. But the great coffee shop, great fun.
people,
so, great people,
great people over there.
Yeah.
For me, it's become like my office away from home. So when I get too sick of the studio and I just need some sunshine and something good and refreshing, I'll just go take the laptop over there and.
It's nice. Yeah. So welcome to the Chiz Pod. This is what this is.
Looks great.
My little home podcasting studio, but it's just really awesome to be able to interact with you from time to time. We've written together. You're doing some great production, great songwriting, just really have so much going on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit of your story, how you got to Nashville and what you're up to?
Yeah, so I guess the quick summary is my name is Sam, and I was born and raised in San Diego, California, and just started writing music as a child, actually. When I was 7, my mom took me to my first concert, which was actually a Christian artist. And
do you remember who it was?
Yeah, some people would know him from back in the day. His name is Dallas Holm.
Oh my gosh. I will rise again.
Yep, same guy.
Yeah.
And long story short, for some reason, the way that he shared spiritual things through music, I just knew what I was going to do with my life that night, instantly. So his stuff, but then lots of other artists over the years. And so inspired by them, I guess it just brought out a natural affinity for writing. So I started writing, but I started playing drums, guitar, a piano.
All because of Dallas and that concert? Or were you playing?
It really started
before?
there.
Wow.
A little, I had piano lessons before that or whatever, but I didn't really see it as anything beyond piano lessons.
Isn't that funny? Just that spark, the Holy Spirit, of course, but God used Dallas to pay it forward in a way that I wonder if he's even aware. I mean, he right?
He is now. We've connected,
Oh,
and I've gotten
cool.
to know
That's
his family a little
good.
bit. In fact, his son
Okay.
Jeffrey is a good friend of mine now, and he plays bass for Jason Crabb.
Oh,
Sorry, I
yeah,
got that
yeah.
name wrong.
Huge Southern gospel. Jason Crabb. Yeah.
Jason Crabb and Matthew West and others, and he's my first call bass player, hands
Mm.
down. I love his style.
That's fantastic. So I'm
Yeah,
so
full circle.
glad. So Dallas, when did you get to connect with him and share the story of
We
your
actually
journey?
connected over email, and then I think Jeffrey might have seen one of my Instagram posts, just kind of honoring like a few people in my life, including him, that are really influential in where I've gotten to now, but they don't even know it probably. And so I remember Jeffrey was like, "My dad needs to see this, and I'll forward it,"
Yeah. Oh, that's
So,
great.
anyways, we haven't connected since then, but just guys like him, Keith Green, many folks from that era. I don't know why that era appealed to me. I think because it was so raw. Like it was a time when Christian music wasn't an industry that was creating
Right,
artists.
right.
It was artists that ended up inspiring this movement.
Exactly.
Because they just were, heroin shooting, whoever's that were already playing music. And then when they had this profound experience of meeting Jesus, they're like, well, I guess I'm singing about Jesus now,
Okay, so true story. Memphis, Tennessee must have been 1977. I went to a Keith Green concert. There must have been all of 38 people
Come on.
there in this tiny little place. And he was so prophetic, man. I was repenting of sins I hadn't even committed. And I was kneeling at the piano bench right beside him. Like, and, everybody kind of came out to the altar, such as it was. It was kind of in a little bitty, kind of like what we'd say is a coffee room, now a coffee house, but tiny place. He's up there just banging on the keys, pouring his heart out. And he wasn't Keith Green then, right? He was just this guy that, was full of the Holy Ghost and power. And it was quite memorable, let me tell you.
Sounds like
and
it.
then he went on to become Keith Green. So,
Doing what he was born to do.
I know, right?
Obviously. Yeah. Just what an incredible force.
Stay out of airplanes, man. Just oof. So,
Seriously.
right.
It's
so,
crazy.
So you're here now, and you're working with artists, and you're producing, and you got this cool studio not too far from me, and
Yeah.
kind of a little cabin vibe and little mountain retreat. So how'd you get here, and what's going on?
Yeah, so kind of shared a little bit about my childhood, just kind of getting inspired by music. But by the time I was 12, 13, I had written like over 200 songs, just not even knowing that was a thing people do, but always had like a structure or a hook in my head that now I think I look back and I'm like, oh, I just had an ear for radio music, like singles,
Yeah.
And so I just chased those down and just couldn't help but process life through songs. And so a family friend had said to my parents, you need to get this guy in a studio. So I don't know how they did it. I've told my parents many times, I'm so grateful to you guys, and I don't know what you did, but they got me into this amazing studio, like a world-class studio with a guy that had been at some big label or something. He started this studio in San Diego.
And you're 13, 14 at this
13 years
time?
old. I remember going in there. Somehow my dad used to trade stuff all the time, and he was in computers. So I'll bet you he traded him some computer work or something.
Yeah.
And
To let his boy come in and
Yeah.
stand in front of the mic. Did you sing? Or
Well,
did you,
honestly,
what did you
it was one of these things where it was like, hey, I have 10 songs. Let's make a record. Yeah.
do?
And at the time, I learned piano in order to play my own piano parts on that record. But I couldn't play to a click track, which is so funny. I look back now and laugh because he was trying to get me to record to a click.
Right.
I couldn't.
Get you on the grid.
Yeah, so it was like, well, I guess just put down an acoustic guitar and build from there. And so we dubbed everything, kind of like how everyone does it now, really.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was in this giant live room that recorded orchestras and choirs and stuff.
No kidding.
Recording on amazing analog gear.
Can you sing any of the song? Can you give us an example? Can you get one
That's a
chorus?
good question.
Anything, right?
Man, let me think back. There was a song called "The Clouds Rolled Away" that the title sticks out to me.
Yeah.
And man, if I had a guitar, I'd probably be able to fake my way through it. But another song that I wrote, I remember being 12 years old and writing this song in the middle of the night. It was called "Here I Am, Lord, Send Me." And it was just kind of that story from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
But it was just, even at that time, I had a heart for people to know Jesus. And it was just, yeah, ever since, that's why I've been in music. But yeah, long story short, after that, did music. After high school, went on tour with a Christian band that some of your listeners might remember if they're into old school underground Christian hip hop, a group called Sackcloth Fashion. So I was in that group.
Wow.
And we toured.
I missed that one, sorry.
No, yeah. I mean, it was kind of one of those, we had a song in a movie, so that's why we toured. But
Wow.
yeah, a song called Pulling a Fast One. So I did that for a while, was in some other bands, and then I was offered a position as a worship leader when I was like 20. And so I married my high school sweetheart and became a worship guy, not even realizing that was going to turn into my career. For 15 years, I was a worship guy at different churches. And during that time, though, just kept writing and always had a studio in my house. I was producing a little on the side, but I always thought of that as like a just getting my creative rocks off kind of thing, you know. But I went to this one church that was this big mega church in Central California, and one of the things we did was started a record label there. And at that point, producing kind of became a daily part of my rule, and eventually kind of turned it over to a guy that I'd hired, and he's still to this day running that ministry. I moved back to San Diego and started my business producing.
Wow. Did that church take off? Did the music?
Oh, yeah. We made records. We had 11 bands rotating through the campuses, leading worship. It was great.
Would we recognize the name of the church?
No. It's called The Well Community Church in Central California, in the Valley. At the time, we had like 4 campuses, and now they're going to one big building. They got like 25 acres, and I'm still friends with all of them. Love those people. So, but yeah, I mean, that was really where I discovered. I had people around me saying, this is what you should do, producing music. I loved just coming alongside all those volunteers, and kind of what we had discovered as worship pastors was like, hey, in Ephesians it says that, you know, our role is to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. So why are we the ones doing all the work? Why are we the ones on stage? You know what I mean? What if we were to actually create something where we can develop the people of the church to be the quote-unquote professionals, you know? Yeah. So we created this whole program that helped them find a lot of creative inspiration and really just become the leaders of the church. And so for a while, man, it was just this really fun, exciting time of building that. But working with those volunteers to help them craft their sound and make songs and record, put out singles and albums, and it was just a great time.
That's so cool.
I loved it.
Yeah, there's nothing like that. I love developing talent as well, and have done that for a lot of years in the companies I've worked with and for, and now with Nashville Christian Songwriters, to see people who really don't know a whole lot about it come into their voice and come into a sense of confidence and power as they learn the skills. And I've had so many people that have produced singles or even whole records that would have been impossible even just a couple of years ago. And we have 2 Grammy nominees now that we've worked with in the past few years. So that's exciting. And so, but that sense of equipping, you know, as a pastor, teacher, you know, that's very rewarding. So that's kind of what I'm hearing in your story. So you worked with that church for a lot of years and then just started your own studio work there in San Diego?
Yeah, there's a guy in San Diego that works for some of the producers here and does a lot of CCM music. And as I moved back, a lot of people were saying, you need to connect with this guy. His name's Mark Suhonen. And it turned out...
Shout out to Mark.
Shout out to Mark. A lot of people in Nashville would know who he is. But anyways, he ended up reaching out to me. He had heard some stuff I did, and he said, man, I've been looking for a guy like you to ghost produce some of the stuff I'm working on because I have too much work. And so he taught me so many things, man. He took like just a kind of a pile of raw potential and then you know, just trained me like, this is what the work pace is. This is how to be organized. This is how to be, you know, he would send me stuff back and be like, hey, that's not good enough. You know, you need to do this, you know.
Everybody needs somebody to kick us in the butt, right? And say, you have more in you. You have better in you than this. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So love Mark. But back when I was in San Diego, man, worked with him a lot. And started my own company, though, and after a while, just kind of started building my own artists and clients, and got too busy with that, really, to work with anyone else. And so, kind of a shout out to you, man. I was telling you before we started recording that, and back to what you were saying a minute ago about just your love for developing. I'm so grateful for you, man. I was one of your listeners. So, a few years ago, listening to the Christian Songwriting podcast and just getting coached by you, even though we hadn't met yet.
Wow.
And
you never know.
You never know.
You never know.
And it was, little did I know, God was using that as one of the things that paved the path toward us moving to Nashville, and now I'm working with heroes,
Wow.
And so just an encouragement to listeners right now, like, man, maybe you cannot imagine reaching for the things God has put in your heart. And, like John has told us all on this podcast, hey, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. So yeah, there are people that should find out this isn't the calling.
Yeah.
But for those where it is, and it's just been in you, God's preparing you for something you might not even be able to imagine, but you got to take the step and work hard, but also take some risks.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy for us to leave everything we knew to move here,
Yeah.
but God was faithful.
So
So thanks for being part of that story.
Yeah, and I mean, you never know, right? And when you're putting out content, you just don't know how it's really going to affect people. But wow, that's great. So you and Kristen and family relocated here a couple of years ago. And
2 years ago, right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, right. Hey, good timing on that, right?
The roads were empty, so it was easy driving the U-Haul here.
So your little cabin in the woods studio isn't that far, about 4 miles or so from where we're sitting right now in the Chiz Pod. But so you came and began to establish yourself. Were you already working with people here in the area before you came? And so that was a little bit of a thread to help you kind of get started here?
A little bit. Just had some friends and some other people in Christian music I was already connected with, and I had this one publishing label that I was talking really seriously with and things like that. So, but in terms of the production, what's interesting is I really didn't know how that was going to go, and that was my full-time thing there. So it was a definite step of faith to just be like, all right, we feel like we're supposed to do this. So we bought our house and moved out here, and
wow,
but God's been faithful, man. I've been busier than I probably should be to be healthy.
Yeah, I was going to say, it paid off, because you're one of the busiest people that I know. And I love busy people. I know a lot of busy people, and I are one. So
yeah,
I know what that means, So it panned out. God provided, and you're working with a lot of independent artists. I know you've produced for Aaron Schust, might be pretty well known, and I was listening to all of your samples, your previews on your site today. Very impressive stuff. That song Paris, I like that one a lot. One of your new artists. What's her name?
Her name's Teresa Guidry. She's a country artist. She was on The Voice, I believe.
Okay.
And she was featured by Country Music Television, some special. And she's just up and coming, an amazing, incredible talent. Her voice blows me away.
Now, do you aspire to be producing country music as well?
I've found myself pulled into it since I've been here.
Right.
And have really learned a lot from writing with some country writers. I work with a country artist pretty often on Curb, and then work with another country artist that some folks might know that used to be in Christian world, Chris Sly.
Yeah, Chris.
And he's taught me a ton. I mean, he's one of the best songwriters I've ever met.
I want to have him on the show.
You should.
Yeah, I've never met Chris, but have another mutual acquaintance. But man, it'd be cool to have him. What a great voice. And
yeah.
Yeah.
He would add a lot of value for sure to both podcasts. But yeah, I love country, but my heart really is supporting worship, Christian gospel. It just, I don't even know. I feel like I enjoy other music genres more than I enjoy making it. Like I enjoy listening to it. But with the Christian and stuff like that, I feel like it's just an extension of being a worship pastor. It's a ministry to me. It pays the bills, which I'm grateful for.
Absolutely.
But it's a ministry.
So were you an upfront worship leader at the church in California? Were you up singing and perform? We do kind of perform and when we're doing worship.
Yeah.
Right. Were you that, or were you more behind the scenes?
Platform guy.
Oh, you're platform guy. Yeah. Do you miss that?
I do. I do sometimes, but I'll tell you, man. In fact, it was a big part of us leaving California and moving here was my kids only knew me as the platform guy. They had never sat in church with me. They weren't used to coming to church with me, because you know how it is in ministry. You're there before sun's up, and you're the last person to leave.
You're there before Jesus gets there.
If he comes at all. Whoops.
Oh.
Anyways, so yeah, my kids just, always knew me as that guy. And now it's been so good the last couple of years to just learn what it's like to be a guy who's not being paid to love Jesus, and just figure out, to be super honest with you, I was wondering after 15 years of that, I was like, do I actually love God if I'm not paid to do this? Like, I just wanted to see what it was like to be a regular Christian
Professional
dude.
Christian,
Yeah, whatever that means. So I was relieved and stoked and all those things to find out, yes, I still love Jesus, even though I'm not in ministry, and I still desire to read the Word and all that. And it was great to be just a guy learning how to be a dad and a husband and sit in church instead of just give, like receiving a little bit for the first time and being taught, and just having to like make friends because I want to, not because I'm the guy up front that has to try to remember everyone's name.
Yeah, right.
You know?
right. And
So-
keep everybody happy, play their favorite songs. Well, now that you've kind of brought that up, where would you say is your spiritual center? I know you love Jesus, you love the Word, but in practice and kind of in your mindset and perspectives, because Christendom is a pretty broad spectrum of people, from way conservative to way liberal. What the conservatives would call liberal, right?
Sure, yeah.
So where's your spiritual home? And I don't mean church denomination. I mean just kind of in your own soul. Where's that center for you?
Man, that could easily be a whole other episode, because and I'm so glad you brought that up. Part of my story is when I was at one of the churches, a large mega church. In fact, that same church that I mentioned with the label, I burnt out hard. And it turned out that some of it was a genetic condition that I have. And I'm fine now, but I would have never known that it existed.
You
if
can
I hadn't.
inherit burnout.
Well, you can have your chemicals.
Not making light of it, but it's like, really, all this
You can.
all this crap I felt forever is like, I got that from my mom and dad.
Well, some of your listeners might have heard of something called MTHFR, and it's a genetic mutation that creates a predisposition because of the way that it can mess with your chemicals, your brain chemicals, and specifically with vitamin B12. It can create it so that you can't methylize it properly, which is super technical, but just simply what it means is sometimes because of the chemical issues, it can predispose you to things like depression and all those kinds of things. So for years I wondered, why am I ready to work at midnight, but I need like 2 pots of coffee to wake up? Like, when it should be the opposite. Cortisol should be like flared up in the morning and start to help you off ramp to sleep at night.
Your circadian rhythms were like off. And
oh man, for years. And so that mixed with just some things that I'd never resolved from just childhood things and family of origin, I was running from those issues and fears and traumas. And so I was predisposed to things like workaholism and just pushing myself way too hard, and that didn't help all the other issues I was having, health-wise. So I just kind of hit a wall at some point, and kind of circling back to your original question, for months leading up to that eventual burnout, when I hit the wall and I just felt like a switch go off, and I had to take time off and get some counseling and see a psychiatrist, get on meds, all that stuff, just because I had just fallen flat.
Wow.
Leading up to that, I went through this like dark night of the soul. And not to be cliche, but just I understood what that meant for the first time. I started just questioning everything. I was diving deep into just material from atheism, just trying to be like, man, I need to understand the other side, because I don't even know if I believe this stuff anymore. And it didn't help that with that dark night of the soul was just a ceiling, a black cloud over me, and I just felt God was not there. Any prayers just bounced right off the ceiling. I just felt like, man, I'm alone. I don't like my kids seeing me like this, so I avoided home. When I was home, I just kind of locked myself in my room and tried to sleep. Man, it was the darkest year of my life. It sucked. And then, on top of that, the feeling of waking up at 5:30 in the morning on a Sunday, leading worship for 5 services, and like look at myself in the mirror thinking, Sam, you got to get up on a stage and lead people to a throne you don't believe is there. And I experienced that for a while, and honestly, as an Enneagram 4, Authenticity.
Hello, 4-4.
Fours represent.
Oh my God.
Authenticity is very important to me, and I can't fake things very well. And having to go through that season of like, man, this is my job, this is my role, I'm supposed to do this, but not feeling it was really hard. And I wouldn't be surprised if that contributed to burning out on top of several other things.
Yeah, it would have to. No way it couldn't, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So to kind of answer your question, it's important to me because at the time I felt like I went through a complete deconstruction of my faith, especially the time after burning out. And luckily, man, I had some amazing people around me and resources, mentors that helped walk me through it. They weren't afraid of my questions. And I remember this one conversation, I was just teary-eyed, just laying out my soul. And he was like, hey, it's okay. Follow these questions to wherever they lead. If God is real, he's big enough to catch you on the other side. So just do this. Just honor the process. And so what's interesting, though, is deconstructed, I guess you could say, which is a big word now, my faith. But I felt like in the process, I went back to the basics. And I feel like what God did was just put me back together again without a lot of the traditional things. But I think a lot of people would look at me now and think I'm about as orthodox and traditional and fundamentalist as you get. Because
It's the beard. They would look at you and say, okay.
It's the cigars and the beard. That's it. But no, I think what faith became for me was just the basic story we've always ever heard. And for me, it's prayer walks. It's me. It's hearing from God and being heard from, being heard by Him, and it's not about the aesthetics, or the bureaucracy, or the professional church world, or because I think what it's easy to do is just be hurt by the organizations
right.
and by the people, and then hold that against God, and by God's grace, I feel like I've been able to see through that, especially being in ministry so long. I think I've just come to terms with the fact that I've probably been one of those people that has hurt people. And I've had to grieve that and repent, so to speak, for that. And but in terms of my own walk with the Lord, it's very, very simple. It's just, man, these are the claims Jesus made. Do I believe them? And at the end of the day, I've come back to be one of those people where I think the Word of God is the Word of God, which just means that I have to take it for what it is, which is pretty simple. It kind of says a lot. It makes some crazy claims, and so it's either true or not.
Wow. Yeah, thanks so much for your transparency and just sharing that, because probably a whole lot of people that are listening have felt those very things, whether they're in ministry or not. I know that I have and did and have been through a lot of those same challenges, having been in ministry of some sort for 42 years.
Right.
I'm freaking old. And, look back, and there were plenty of times that I had to walk through the exercise of leading people. And I'm up there wondering, even if I didn't go so far as doubting God, even in those years, but wondering, how come I don't feel any of this? Why doesn't this feel real to me?
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it wasn't so much of a deconstruction. I mean, I've walked through a bit of that myself. And Brian McLaren has a cool book, if it's even pertinent to you at this moment, but it's called Faith After Doubt. And it's a very powerful book, very powerful. It spoke to me on a lot of levels, so I get a lot of where you're coming from.
Yep.
So how does all this play into when you're working with an artist, writing with an artist, and you are coming from a place of more, not a deconstructed faith, but a more organic faith, right? So when you're working with an artist and trying to bring the best out of them, do you find yourself kind of pulling on all those years working at the Well Church and really kind of, I guess what I'm asking is, how do you go about bringing out the best in someone that you're working with as a producer now?
I think some of it is, especially if you're working with a Christian artist, a worship artist, gospel artist, whatever. If I'm working with with some folks who have subscribed to the same faith, then you already believe the same things, hopefully, which, as you said earlier, can have nuance because of how broad Christianity is now. But at that point, it's getting to know them as a person. What do they want to say? And helping them say that clearly the best I can. So I find myself often, doesn't matter who it is, a signed artist or an indie artist, whoever comes to me, I often will bring in writers around them.
Oh, okay.
To me, my approach is I almost produce like a songwriter because I'm sure I've heard you say this before on the podcast. The song's the most important thing. Everything rises and falls on this song, and so to me, it's like I don't even feel comfortable taking someone's money just to make a song sound cool. In fact, I just wrote a song this last week with a songwriter some of your listeners might know, Tony Wood.
Oh yeah,
I brought him into
crazy good.
He's a legend, and we've gotten to be very close and write a lot together now. We love writing together. But I pulled him into a project for this amazing artist I'm sure everyone's going to hear about someday, named Jason Biddle. He's got a story that would blow your minds.
You got to get him on the show.
We do, absolutely.
Yeah. How do you spell that last name? What is it?
Biddle.
Oh, okay.
Jason Biddle. But we're making a project right now, and man, this song. What's crazy about this song is that we wrote it. So we did draft one together, me and Jason, based on an idea he kind of had that he wanted to write about. Then we pulled Tony in. Tony came. We spent a few hours on it.
Took it to a whole new level.
Oh,
sure.
Well, lyrics are his superpower, and so he'll take a mediocre lyric and turn it into something that is just show-stopping. So what's crazy about this, though, is we did a quick demo that day, just a piano and a vocal, and Jason called me yesterday, and he said, Sam, everyone I've shown that to has been in tears. Just the unedited,
just as it is. Just raw,
unedited vocal, everything. And it just helped me remember, like, this is why I do it this way. This song stands alone. I haven't even touched it yet. And it's already impacting lives.
Yeah.
And I showed it to my wife yesterday, and we were both like watering up just listening to it really quick on the drive to a meeting last night. And she's like, yeah, this is a really good song.
Wow.
Which for her, she doesn't say that very often.
Yeah.
She's got a high bar, which I love.
And, well, you've trained her that way. So.
Or she trained me.
Years ago, I was mentored by Bill and Gloria Gaither I was with them for 7 years, and they would listen to my songs, and he would always, several things that I teach from today, he would ask me, who's going to care about this in 100 years, And that really raised the bar for me and my lyric writing, and allowed me to write a song that's in 2 hymnals, and I'm not even dead yet. So, so it kind of stuck, awesome. Right? But the thing that he always emphasized to me, and probably to many people around him, is if you can't sing a song a cappella and it move people, then you might not have a great song.
Yeah.
And, I know we love Ear Candy. We love the production side. You're amazing at it. But a song that can be sung a cappella and still stand up, that's cool. And I think that's rare in our time, and in the current world of CCM and worship, maybe a little more often. You can sing, what a beautiful name it is.
Yeah.
And it's a cappella, and it's okay. But then there are songs like "Bless the Lord, oh my soul." That one stands up a cappella, right? So
sure does.
I'm always thinking about that when I'm writing. Is could you just be at a campfire, holding hands, singing this song, and it still be as meaningful? So I'm excited to hear the song from Jason and you guys.
I'll share it with you. He's got a couple like that, honestly, that I think are gonna. I think he's going to have quite a voice and quite a platform in the coming months and years.
Yeah,
for sure.
Wow. Well, what's the one thing you'd say to someone who's listening to our show today, that they're out there, they're outside the Nashville bubble, maybe they're not a killer player or even a killer singer, but they feel they have a call. I know that you have a heart for songwriters. I love the content you put out. And we'll put all that in the show notes today so that people can connect in with you. But
thank you, brother.
What's the one thing you'd say for someone who's like, I feel so called, but I just don't even know where to start?
Well, first of all, it always surprises me, even in my own life, how God will use the stages that we are in to prepare us for the next chapters that we can't even imagine yet. And so the thing that feels like a call at 8 years old or 18 or 28 or 58, we often, in fact, I had a friend literally tell me the same thing over coffee yesterday, and he's a good friend that has been very instrumental in the music industry, and he just said, because I was sharing some dreams so I'm in the same stage as you, listener, right now. Maybe your dream looks like really explicitly simple, like I'm going to be the next Chris Tomlin, whatever. My dream looks a little bit different than that. Things I want to do after 40, the second half of life. And I was sharing this with him, and he said, and he was one of the few people I've shared this with, and he just said, hey, be encouraged by this. He's like, one, I'm really compelled by this vision and dream, but be encouraged by this. It's probably not going to look anything like what you imagine it is now.
Yeah.
And so to the listener, I would say, you're imagining yourself on stage with a leather jacket and an arena of people singing your song. And there's something about that dream that can just make your heart beat faster and take your breath away. And it's so compelling, you can just move heaven and earth and do really stupid things to try to do that before you actually even know that is the picture, that's the thing. So not to discourage you from trying, but just realize that you're not the one ultimately. If we subscribe to this faith thing, that we believe God is sovereign, that God cares about the details of our lives and is writing the story, we're not the ones writing the story. And so I would say, in a way, be open-handed to let God guide it, which really puts us on the spot, because at that point, faith isn't just, I go to church and I think God is real and blah, blah, blah. This is like a daily walk of saying, like sharing your fears with God and just being like, God, I guess if I was to put it into simple terms, my dream looks like this, and just spell it out, and then be like, but God, I live in like a cornfield and wherever, and I don't know anyone in the music industry.
Right.
And honestly, I can't stand the sound of my own voice when I hear it back recorded, and blah, 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 like all these fears. And then just say, but God, like, what is your dream for me? What is your vision for me? And I want what you want. I think when we get to that point where we can say that really authentically, like, God, here's what I want, but I want what you want. It's like a magical and yet scary place to be, but I feel like that's the tension that we need to look for. And then at the same time, like we talked about, work ethic is probably the most important. I would say that the next after that, it's the next important thing. It's just like, okay, if you really are called and if you really are that good, work ethic's going to prove it. Every single person I know in the music industry, bar none, every person I know got there because they worked really hard. It doesn't matter if they're in publishing, in radio promoting, as an artist, as a songwriter. Every person did it because of their dedication and hard work.
It takes what it takes, right?
Yeah, it takes what it takes. No one is sitting around waiting to just give someone a platform that they didn't work.
Let's say it right out loud, waiting on God to show up and do it.
Yeah.
He doesn't. He just doesn't. He gives you the dream, if that's what we call showing up. But you got to put feet to the pavement, man, and feet to the prayers and go at it. I know that.
Absolutely.
So true. Yeah.
Well, we know that even because of the story of grace. And this is where Christians divide over this. But, let's just take it at face value. God did his part at the cross.
Right.
But what's our part? We have a role. And so in the same way, we have a role in our calling. We really do.
Yeah.
If it's a calling, we get to show up for it.
Well, my two life verses are Proverbs 16:9 that says, the mind of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. And that flows right in with what you're saying, as well as Ephesians 3:18, that he is able to do exceedingly abundantly. Think about that phrase, above and beyond all that we can ask or even think. And I don't know if you'd say this, but I can say with all authenticity that when I look back at my pretty long life now, that the greatest things in my life were things I was not smart enough to pray for. They weren't things that I could even articulate, including Nashville Christian songwriters. This was a total surprise. My whole 40 years of ministry, working with the companies, having hundreds of songs recorded, doing the records, traveling, I wasn't smart enough to tell God that's what I wanted. I had a sincere heart. I had a dramatic conversion. I wanted to share, him with the world. When I came to Christ at 18 years old, the first thing I wanted to do was write a song about it, and dreamed of getting it published. And now here we are. And it's like, oh my freaking goodness, right? I couldn't have planned this. And so I've just learned in my old age here to just let it go and, have those conversations, like you said, just put it out to God and trust, and let him do with it what he will. So,
yeah, I think that what we tend to call calling is a clue.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily the ideal that we see in our brain. And so it takes work to unpack it, and it takes years and a lot of patience, but a lot of work.
Yeah.
Can I tell a quick story?
I guess you can.
No, I think of this, I just wanted to share this season of my life because I hope it encourages someone who's listening who just is maybe rolling their eyes and just feeling like that's not helpful. Anything you guys just said is really pie in the sky, and
let go of my dream.
Like, yeah, it's like you're supposed to be encouraging me to have my dream and pursue it, and you're
give me the 8 steps to get there. 8 steps to be just like Chris Tomlin. Now for only $99.99 from Sam and John.
Yep.
Right?
Here's my next course.
The new course.
For how you can beat Chris Tomlin. Totally. No, what's funny is around the time I was listening to this podcast, so a couple years before COVID, I would say, I was living in East County, San Diego, leading worship, feeling like, man, I love leading worship, but I feel like I'm not doing what I was put on this earth to do. And I had my company at the time, and so I would lead worship, doing my day job at the office, leading a team. And then I would come home, have dinner, play with my kids, throw them around a little bit, do whatever, put them to bed at 7:30, and then go out to the studio till midnight and work hard. And I was doing both for years. And I was in the middle of that season, and I was one day on one of these prayer walks, which, quick distraction, the reason I started doing prayer walks was once I was, I guess you could say, recovering from that season of burnout. I lived in downtown Fresno, California, and at the time it was still kind of a developing area that probably 15 years earlier was completely ruled by gangs and whatever.
Right,
but we bought this little cheap house in the middle of that area, and so there were people that would walk around talking to themselves. Maybe they were on substances, maybe not, maybe homeless or whatever. And I just started realizing people walking around our neighborhood talking to themselves, and I was like, and I discovered that the whole prayer closet idea was never working for me. So I found I needed to talk out loud to God, right? So I just started doing the same thing, just walking around the neighborhood in my slippers, talking to myself, and no one cared. I just blended right in. So
you blended right in.
Yeah. So unpause from that distraction.
Yeah.
So years later, here I am. I was on this prayer walk in San Diego, California, and I had gotten to this place where I was just like pouring out my heart to the Lord. I was like, God, I guess if I was to really just try to say to you what I want or what I feel is coming up inside, and I don't know if any of you guys listening ever feel like there are some things so sacred you can't even say them out loud to God. And I think I felt that for years. But at this moment, I was just like, I think I'm feeling brave enough to just say it. And so I said, God, if I could do anything and money was no object, I would just move to Franklin, Tennessee, and I would make the most impactful Christian music with the most impactful Christian music makers. And I said it, and then it was just like, all right, and God, I guess you just do what you want with that, but I'm telling you, if there's a way you can make that work, I'm in. I'm here for it. I'm in. Well, I started just praying that now often. And long story short, at the same time, the Lord was doing something with our marriage. We had gotten to a place in our marriage where we didn't even realize how much resentment was there. We didn't realize how much we had kind of settled into our lanes to just try to stay out of each other's way. But God was doing something at this time where we were in therapy, and we had a pastor and his wife who were kind of like our parents almost, just mentoring us. And we saw some crazy cool gains in our marriage. And we had gotten to a place to where almost we were like in a honeymoon phase again. And we were having these conversations like you do when you're first married of just like, what's your dream? What's our goal? What are we going to do with our lives? And
Good time, yeah.
Yeah, during one of those conversations, Kristen said to me, like, babe, if money was no issue, and this is huge for her because Kristen's a type 6, Enneagram type 6 with a 7 wing. She's always thinking really wisely about preparing for the future and finances. She likes her ducks in a row. You know, she's the one of us thinking investments and saving and budgets. And so this was huge for her. It was a big step of faith to even ask this question. And she said, I just want to know. I don't want you to like feel like you have to tell me the right answer or do what you think I want to hear or be the responsible guy or whatever. She's like, if money was no issue, what would you want to do today? What would you want to do with your life? And I had already been having this conversation with the Lord on these prayer walks. And so I instantly, without thinking, just said the same thing I said to God that day. I said, babe, that's easy. I'd move to Franklin, Tennessee and make the most impactful Christian music on the planet with the most impactful Christian music makers on the planet. Yeah. And she said, what? How long have you wanted to do this? And I was like, since I was 7 years old, reading the back liner notes of like my mom's.
Dallas home.
Yeah. Reading like vinyl records and cassette tapes. And she's like, why aren't we doing that?
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, wait, are you kidding me? Like, you would leave our cushy, like, salary with benefits to go on this crazy adventure with me?
And you're 6 with a 7 wing. And you'd be willing? Yeah.
And she said, I just want what God wants. Yeah. And God had taken us to this point to where that's what we were both thinking. And I don't know who it is listening to that, but I'll tell you, that day is the domino that started the dominoes. And within a year and a half of that conversation, we lived in Franklin, Tennessee, making Christian music with some of the most impactful Christian music makers.
Amazing.
And so I say that to encourage someone out there who just can't imagine what that next step is for you. And I think it starts with just some radical honesty with yourself and with God. If you're a person who subscribes to the whole God thing, it starts there.
Yeah. Wow. Sam, man, that is amazing that God brought Kristen around to that and brought you guys to such unity and harmony. And now you're here. And how can people interact with you? What's the best way for people to connect with you as a producer, songwriter, just your whole thing?
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Well, I'm on Instagram. I post mainly there, and I have a huge heart, like you mentioned earlier, for songwriters and artists. I'd love to just spend a lot of time thinking of ways to encourage artists. So if you're an artist or a songwriter listening to this, definitely let's interact on Instagram. Check out some of those posts, and if they mean something to you, don't hesitate to reach out and tell me how. And you know, I'm a resource on Facebook as well. And then if you want to check out some of the production stuff that I'm part of, samhartmusic.com is kind of my website.
Yeah. Awesome, bro. You got to come back.
I'd love it, man.
Hey, thanks for joining us on the show today. I hope that you'll jump over to NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com and check out all the resources there to encourage you in your own songwriting. And if you like what we're doing, why not share this episode out on your socials? You can find the link in the show notes. We'll see you next time.